Hello, and welcome to this week's video of Christ and His Church, going through the book of Luke and the book of Acts, and showing or pulling out some little nuggets that can tell us more about who Christ is and what our response is as a church. We're getting close to the end. We're in Acts chapter 24 today, and Tommy did a great job setting this up last week with Acts 23, showing how Paul gets to this point and the motive that's going to be underlying Paul's speeches and Paul's attitude throughout this whole thing. So if you haven't seen that yet, I encourage you to go back and watch that because a lot of that pours over into Acts 24 as well. So probably not going to touch on some of that, but go watch last week's video with Tommy. And if you haven't been watching up to this point or missed a few, be a great chance to go back and kind of cover some other stuff that we've covered. But if this is your first time, then hey, that's okay. And we'll jump into Acts 24, and there'll still be some good stuff for us in there, I believe. I don't know if you've ever been wrongfully accused of something. Hopefully it's nothing major. Mostly we can relate to that on a level of if you've had brothers or sisters, at some point you've probably been wrongfully accused of something you didn't actually do, or blame starts to be shifted on one way. I remember one time when my brother first got pulled over in a car. He was getting, my parents were giving him a stern talking to about being pulled over for speeding, and he shifted all the blame on me, or not all the blame. He was like, well, I only did it because Blake said he really needed me, so I was on my way to get Blake, and so he threw me under the bus. Yeah, I'll remind him of this. And I got yelled at, and I was like, what in the world? Why am I getting in trouble because of what he did? It's not exactly the same, but you've probably been in a similar situation where your sibling or somebody around you did something wrong, and they shift the blame or even accuse you of doing it. And you can imagine the feelings of anger and resentment you probably feel of like, oh, that's not cool, right? There's a little bit of that here in Acts 24. So we're going to look at how Paul responds, but also another story of how someone responds to wrongful accusations that can really highlight that story. But first, Acts 24. So Tommy set it up again last week. And so this Tertullus goes before Felix, and he starts to sugar him up a little bit. He's like, you're doing great at what you're doing. Like you're solid. And I know what you've been doing is trying to keep peace, and you've done a great job of that, right? Sorry, that's my phone. Reforms being made all around. We've enjoyed the peace under you. Like you're doing a great job. But this dude named Paul is trying to uproot all of that. That's what Tertullus says. He's running around trying to, says we have found this man to be a plague among us. Like he is a sickness that needs to be rooted out. One who stirs up riots. He's a ringleader of this crazy little sect, and he's even tried to profane the temple. But no worries, because we've captured him, and we've brought him to you, so do as you see fit. Now, how much of this has Paul actually done? Have there been riots? Yes, but is Paul running in, sorry, with a small little sect trying to stir up a bunch of fighting and insurrection among these cities? No, that's not what Paul's doing. That has been an effect, I guess, of what Paul has done, where riots have broken out because of what he said or what he's done. But he's not going in and like leading all these charges to overthrow the government or anything. Like that's not his purpose. But that's how Tertullus makes it sound, right? It's like, you're doing a great job keeping peace, but this guy named Paul, he's trying to uproot everything you're trying to do. And so, clearly a lie, and framing Paul for something he has not done. And so Paul makes his defense, and he speaks up, and he says, no, that is not how it's done. And again, what Tommy talked about last week, I'm here because, but I do confess to you. None of that's true. But I do confess that according to the way, which they call a sect, I worship the God of our fathers, believing everything laid down by the law and written in the prophets, having hope in God, these men themselves accept, that there will be a resurrection of both the just and the unjust. It says, look, if you want to know my motives, my underlying motives, it's not to overthrow the government. It's not to uproot anything you're doing. Like, you're doing fine, okay, whatever. Sorry. Here's my underlying motive. Is that, look, this little sect that they're talking about, yeah, it's the way. We follow Christ, and we believe everything that's written down in the law and the prophets, having hope in God that there will be a resurrection of the just and the unjust. That's what we believe. And so, how do I respond to all that? So I always, verse 16, take pains to have a clear conscience toward both God and man. I think that's pretty important. Sometimes we can go a little too far, I think, with who cares what anybody thinks about you, right? Just do you, you're good. If anybody thinks different of you, then whatever, right? I get the motive behind that. We don't want people's perception of us to drive who we think we are, that kind of stuff. But also think we need to have this kind of attitude that Paul has in 24, verse 16. I take pains, like I'm trying constantly to have a clear conscience toward God. First off, I want to be right in the eyes of God. I want to be unburdened, have a clear conscience before God. So I'm watching my actions and my thoughts and everything to make sure that I do not present myself guilty before Him. But also toward man. I don't want to run around and give anybody, especially these people who are accusing me, any ammo to say, look at what this guy's doing. Look at what this Paul's doing. He's doing all this stuff. He says, no, look, I've made some serious effort to make sure that I have a clear conscience that man can't look to me and say, bring out all this other stuff. Like I'm trying to remain pure before man as well. So I'm aware of what people think of me, and I want them to see me as not this insurrectionist who's just running around being crazy, but somebody whose every action is to honor God and to live in hope of the resurrection. That's what I want to be known by. And I think that's important. Like, what do the people around us know us by? What is our calling card or our mantra that people look at and they're like, okay, I know what drives that dude. It's not money, it's not power, it's not fame, it's not list off, right? I know by the way this guy talks, the way he acts, the way he lives, that he lives in hope of the resurrection. That's what he's all about. And hopefully the people around us can see that in our lives. And so he goes on, and eventually he's put on house arrest because Felix is like, yeah, okay, I know the sect you're talking about, and it's not about what all these people say it's about. It's about something different. And so you can read out the rest of the chapter to see some of the other stuff that happens. But I'm going to shift focus a little bit to a person who is also put on trial in the Bible, and accused of a lot of stuff that he didn't actually do or wasn't actually about, and how he responded. So Jesus is put on trial toward the end of his life, and the Jews bring all these accusations against him to Pilate to try to get him in some deep trouble. And one really fascinating thing that Jesus does or does not do in that trial is try to defend himself. And I think that's huge. Like Paul makes some long efforts to literally give him a defense of his actions and what he's doing. And not that Paul's wrong for doing that, or anybody in that position's wrong for saying, hey, no, you're accusing me wrongly. Yeah, defend yourself. That's not what I'm saying. But I think it highlights Jesus being put in this situation where he knows that his purpose is the cross. Like that he knows that's where his life is leading to, and that's what he came on earth to do. And so even in the face of all these wrongful convictions, he stands before Pilate and is, for the large part, silent. Like barely says anything. To the point where Pilate's like, dude, just defend yourself a little. Like, I know if I was at that point, at my very best, like there's no way I would have been able to go through all the stuff that Jesus went through the way he did it. I probably would have bowed out in the garden, right? I'd have been like, okay, yeah, I'm not going to do this. But at my ultimate very best, if I'd have gotten to the point where Jesus was before Pilate and all these wrongful actions, I'd been like, okay, look, sure, keep going if you want, but just let the record show that none of this stuff is true, right? That it's all garbage. Okay, that's the human nature in this, right? To just say, okay, look, at least let the record show. But Jesus doesn't do any of that. He stays silent and silently faces all these wrongful convictions all the way to the cross. Maybe if he spoke up, because Pilate was kind of looking for a way out. Maybe if he spoke up a little bit and defended himself, he probably could have easily found an out for himself out of the cross, right? But he doesn't. He faces all this stuff and goes willingly to the cross so that we can have life. Lays down his own life so that we can live. And then is brought back to life. And it is that kind of hope. And because of those actions that we can even have hope in the resurrection, right? Because Jesus faced all these wrongful convictions and said nothing, but went to the cross anyway so that we may have life. So hopefully those little pieces of those little nuggets out of Acts 24 are helpful to remind us of how are we presented among the people around us, but also to remind us of the devotion, the loyalty, and the actions of Jesus in his final days that were not easy at all, right? Where every step of the last bits of Jesus' life were extremely hard. But yet he goes against all that and says, okay, I'm going to do this anyway so that you may have life. So may we remember that sacrifice and honor that today and throughout our lives. If there's anything we can help you with, please reach out to us here at the church building. We'd love to be able to assist in any way we can. If not, hope you have a great rest of the week, and we'll see you next week.